The Baltimorons is a 2025 American film directed by Duplass, one half of the Duplass brothers, and co-written with Michael Strassner, who also stars as the lead, along with Liz Larsen and Olivia Luccardi. Three actors, three really, really good performances. There are some other, minor actors and characters too, but those are the three that the movie, really focuses on, with the majority of the screen time going to Strassner and Larsen. So, I gotta say, guys, I have been really enjoying the return of comedy movies in 2025. It had been just so long since I had seen a comedy in the theater. I had basically forgotten what it was like going on, some silly adventure with a room full of strangers, taking notice, of which jokes get the most laughs, and walking out of the theater thinking, maybe things aren't so bad after all. And I think we need that now more than ever. Let's not fucking kid ourselves, man. I mean, earlier this year we got Friendship, which is arguably my favorite film this year, and maybe my favorite comedy in over a decade. We got the surprisingly good slapstick spoof legacy sequel, Naked Gun movie. I also saw The Roses, by the way, which was super disappointing, bordering on terrible. Yeah, one of my big letdowns of the year so far. But this month, we finally got a few really good. Can we call them like elevated comedies? Would that work? Like classy kind of comedy dramas focused on strong writing and characters. For a reference point, when I'm talking about movies like this, I always like to use Sideways as an example. God, I love that movie. One of my favorite movies of all time. But anyways, earlier in September, we got a movie from Neon called Splitsville, a surprisingly well-written comedy drama. And now we have The Baltimorons, one of my favorite hidden gems of 2025. The plot follows a misguided sketch comic in a struggling relationship who gets stranded in the city and ends up on a random adventure with his dentist. Being a fan of comedy and well-written movies, there was just a lot for me to like here. First, this is a simple yet original story that I found very, very relatable in some ways, maybe not all, but for me personally, relatable. The characters feel very real, just like pulled out of real life, with real life dreams and real life problems. Another thing that I absolutely loved was that it proudly takes place in Baltimore, Maryland. And I mean, like, it was actually filmed in Baltimore, not Canada or Bulgaria or whatever, or just, a couple of, like, some principal photography in the city, actually in Baltimore. It also features an all Baltimore crew and is essentially a love letter to the city. Or as the locals call it, Baltimore. You gotta, with a D, you gotta pronounce it like that, Baltimore. I mean, every city has its own unique history, whether it be Detroit or Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, the list goes on. And I absolutely love a movie where its location is almost like a character of its own. This film, kind of let me explore a city that I've never been to, and I absolutely loved the journey. I had never seen so many soft shell crab references, by the way, but it made me happy every time, literally every time. So this film does have some sad undercurrents, but like in a real life way, because personally, I didn't find this to be like a downer type movie, and I appreciated the overall honesty. And I say this now because the first time you meet our lead, Cliff, played by Michael Strassner, he is attempting to hang himself. It's a bold move because, I mean, it's also literally the very beginning of the movie. And it must have been set up just so perfectly because I did laugh a little bit, which I believe was the intended response. I mean, think about it. In a writing sense, I think there's a fine line between making a scene like this funny, albeit very dark, or incredibly sad. I guess really it's both. And this was just a scene, shown to show where Cliff's mind had been at some point. Because skipping forward, you see him and his girlfriend Brittany, played by Olivia Luccardi. And they seem pretty happy in this scene, as they are driving out to her parents to spend Christmas Eve. So yeah, it takes place on Christmas Eve, but I don't know if I would necessarily call this a Christmas movie. That said, I will probably put this on next to The Holdovers for like recent films that I'll probably be rewatching every year around the holidays and stuff. And in this scene, we also learn that Cliff is a recovering alcoholic, and the way that it's revealed was really well done, I thought. Honestly, the writing was generally really good just throughout this entire film, with a few minor exceptions. So yeah, anyways, Cliff and Brittany, things seem really good for them, but that also seems to change almost as soon as they get to Brittany's parents' house, which was kind of jarring. It was like a little too much, too fast. So you now learn that Cliff was part of a sketch comedy troupe, but since he's in recovery, Brittany has forbidden him to, even step foot in a comedy club. So it shows that kind of, at the same time, she is doing what she believes is best for him, for his health and everything, but she is stifling him as a person, as a creative being. So anyways, Cliff ends up slipping on some ice, knocking out one of his teeth, and he gets lucky and finds one dentist in Baltimore that is open on Christmas Eve. It does feel way too convenient. Like, why would that even happen? But only at first. So the dentist, her name is Dee Dee, played by veteran actress Liz Larsen. So at her office, Cliff overhears her on a phone call with her daughter, and this is where we learn that Dee Dee is recently divorced. So Cliff feels bad, but also incredibly grateful, truly grateful for fixing his tooth on a holiday. And so he invites her to Brittany's parents' house for dinner, but it kind of annoys her, and she declines. So knowing that these two become the focal point of the film, and they do, it's hard to see at this point how it would actually work, because Dee Dee comes off as kind of cold and somewhat distant, and just very uninterested in Cliff in every possible way. Cliff, though, on the other hand, is he's bubbly and outgoing, and I'll admit, he had to grow on me, but grow on me he did. He fires off a lot of jokes, and in my opinion, not for me, anyways, not every one of them lands. But if he doesn't win you over, man, I'll be a little bit sad about it. What I liked most about Cliff, I think, is that he reminds me of one or two people I've met over the years, and those honestly were some of the best people I've ever known. He's a bit lost, and I can relate to that heavily. He's struggled with alcohol and depression. I can also relate to those, but you wouldn't know it because he doesn't make things about himself. He's a great dude, and we should all strive to be like Cliff, honestly. That to me would be an achievement just by itself. And Dee Dee, like I said, has a completely different personality. She seems, like I said, mostly annoyed by Cliff's antics at first, but, he wants to cheer her up, and she eventually does let her guard down. So I mentioned earlier that they, end up going on an adventure together. Two complete strangers, and you're probably wondering how that happened exactly. So after Dee Dee, fixes Cliff's tooth, which he makes a joke about, that old reference, getting the thorn out of the lion's paw, which I thought was a great line. He goes outside to find his car towed away. Again, apparently this is just not super uncommon for him. So she ends up taking him to the impound lot where his car is there, but no one is. No one's working or whatever. It's Christmas Eve, and Cliff needs his car. Obviously, he wants to get the fuck out of there, and he has no choice but to get it out of there. Get it out of there by himself. Fuck tow companies. Seriously, fuck you. So at this point, Dee Dee is becoming less annoyed with Cliff because she's realizing that unlike a lot of people in her life, he's good. He's one of the good people. He really, at this point, just doesn't want her to spend Christmas Eve alone. And as the evening closes in, they drive around Baltimore. And even though Cliff is happy, he feels that his relationship with Brittany is falling apart really fast. And I think you get the idea that it probably has been for quite some time. Now, one of my favorite parts here is where he tells her that there's a sketch comedy show happening and that he used to be part of a sketch comedy troupe called the Baltimorons. And they decide to go. And he tells her, why he stopped doing comedy and how he got burned, pretty bad in the scene, and was kind of ostracized by a lot of a lot of his fellow comedians. The reason for it, I felt like could have been written just a little bit better, though. It didn't quite line up for me, but it's not really that hard to overlook in a scene as good as this, because when Cliff opens up to Dee Dee, it really means something to her. And I don't want to spoil it, but he ends up, getting talked into doing an impromptu Baltimorons set with Dee Dee helping out, because it's sketch comedy and it requires at least two people, and she's never done sketch comedy. And at this point, she starts to see Cliff, for who he really is. But the most important thing is that Cliff proved to himself that he could do comedy without drinking alcohol, and that was a huge deal. And he also starts to realize, that although, her intentions are really good, Brittany wants him to be a different version of himself instead of supporting him, and doing what would make him happy. There's a line that he ends up saying to her that I want to repeat, but it meant so much to me on a personal level that I don't want to ruin it. But it really mirrors like how I feel about life and relationships, and it hit me pretty hard. Okay, well, I mean, clearly I could talk about this movie all day, but I really should hold back at least a little bit. So for me, this film was probably my biggest surprise this year. It's funny, but it's also smart and deep, and it needs to be seen by as many of you as possible. So I'm giving the Baltimorons an 8.5 out of 10. Cheers, guys, and I'll see you at the multiplex.